There we are. All right, so welcome to our last check-in of the school year. This one's going to be a little bit different, kind of a different take on what we do with our data at the end of the year. So welcome again. Thank you for being here. And if you missed the note taker, Julie's going to put that link in the chat for us a couple of times as we go along. Thank you, Julie. All right, so as always, our community agreements are the same, that we're going to stay engaged, trust in the good intentions, speak your truth if you have a question, you have a comment. This is a safe space. And then as always, I try to put a good quote, and I found this one I've seen before, but it's a great quote. It says, "A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops." And even though we may not see what we've accomplished each year as the school year comes to an end, further on down the line, you've affected more lives than you probably realize. So please keep that in mind. All right. Here is, again, we've got the link in the chat for the note taker. I've already done the welcome. We're going to have some WIDA updates, some DESE updates, resources, talk about some PD opportunities. And then our topic is using your data for program evaluation. And that's where we're at today. As always, our blueprint to success, which is found on the DESE webpage for ELD. And kind of the same topics that we cover most times were our shared responsibility for English learners, being asset-based in our teaching and learning, being prepared, having our educators prepared with high standards for our ELs, the resources they need, and providing them with rigorous learning opportunities to build on their assets, and giving them academic and linguistic supports. Those are our kind of our focus of the majority of our meetings. But we will have in the future a few of these others next year. And we're working really hard on developing something with the counseling department to help address the needs of enrolling, especially high school students, and working towards their college graduation and career ready, and just enrolling them in school and making sure they get the credit. So look for that for next year. That's something we'll be addressing then. As far as WIDA updates, again, registration is open for the WIDA conference. If you're going to be lucky enough to attend, there's the link for that there. There are also some things that have been recently released by WIDA. There's an article on the Digital Standards Explorer. And this is that, I can't remember what it's called all of a sudden, the link that gives you a one-page access to all of the WIDA standards that are broken down. It's a pretty good satchel, that's what it's called. But this takes you to that satchel link so that you can look at those. And it just makes a concise viewing platform for you to see those. So that's available. And then WIDA and DRC have some presentations they're going to be doing this summer, and those can be accessed through the secure portal on the webinars page. And then they will also post a recording of those later on if you're unable to watch them on that May 18th date. All right. Then advancing Atella, that's our working with English learners with special needs. They are looking for some assistance, and there's a link here about tell us about your child survey pilot study flyer. So if you would click on that, if you have students with special needs that you work with, that would be very helpful to them. Right. And then access test scores, I don't know if you've checked, but they're supposed to be released between May 18th and 23rd, so any day now. The printed results are supposed to be delivered to schools between May 31st and June 3rd. So be watching for those. They should be coming really soon. And that kind of leads into what we're talking about today. All right. And then as far as DESE updates, same thing that I shared last month. We have a summer literacy summit that's coming up. We still don't have all the specifics worked out for that. It will be at Stony Creek in Columbia, July 12th and 13th, I believe, are the dates. So watch the DESE calendar that I've shared in the past on the curriculum main page at the bottom, and it will have the link for signing up for that. Also, I wanted to share for Rob again that Elevate is coming up, and if you haven't signed up, that's June 7th and 8th, and it will be at Rittner High School in St. Louis. So some great speakers will be there. So if you haven't registered and there's still space, please sign up for that. It's a great experience. I've been there several years and it never disappoints. So there's that. And then there's that link to our curriculum calendar that I was just talking about. So if you click on that, that will take you where you need to go to find those PD offerings as they become available. And there again is the link to the DESE ELD webpage if you don't have that bookmarked, so that you can find out that. There will be no June or July check-ins, so enjoy your vacation. But we will have an ELD Summer Academy for new ELD teachers or anyone who just wants to come and kind of brush up on ELD information. It's going to be pretty much what I've presented in the past, but it's focusing mostly on what new teachers or new administrators might need to know about English language development. And that will be on July 17th, starting at 10:30 and going till noon or until we finish. And then for next year, the WIDA self-paced e-learning will be available again. This year's offering is still available until August 30th. So if you haven't watched it, you can still log on through the secure portal and view any of those self-paced learning offerings until August 30th. There are a few brand new ones on the self-paced for next year. And we will also be offering 2 facilitated virtual learning sessions next year. One of those will be on using the new standards. Tracy Rutherford said that she had seen some information on that, and I was able to get that secured for us, but they haven't quite set the date yet. They're looking for when the facilitators are available. So we'll have that one. And I believe the other one is also about using the new standards. So those again will be available on that calendar link when they become definite. So keep in tune for those. And they'll also be in our newsletter when it becomes available. All right. So discussion for today is going to be around the annual LIEP evaluation timeline. So LIEP means Language Instructional Educational Program. And that's basically just the program that you use in your school to help English language learners. Every year, your district, your school should be doing an evaluation of how your program is doing. Not just for the state, but for your district as well. So when you get your test scores, this is one of the things that probably should be step 1 for all of your districts. And it's a continued improvement approach that goes back to those Castaneda, that framework that we've talked about a few times in the past. That was a big focus for the federal government for all of last year. And what that says is that your program has to be based on a sound educational theory or research, implemented effectively with adequate resources and personnel, and that the program is evaluated as effective in overcoming language barriers. So those are the 3 things that we look at. And again, that's been the focus of our federal government as far as the ELD program for several years now. And they're continuing with that. That's kind of what everything they speak about lately, they focus on these 3 things. So we're going to continue with that. So, but we need to go beyond Castaneda. And that improvement can help our English learners and make sure that they have that high quality instruction and service that they need in the schools. So what is an LIEP evaluation? It gives you that opportunity to reflect on your school and your system, what you have in place, and it allows you an internal coordination to see what is needed and what stakeholders need to be involved in improving your program. Some districts may not realize that there's a lot at stake for their building if your ELs aren't making progress. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit. What it is not is a punitive process that looks at the individual, the ELD teacher, and says what they're doing wrong. That's not what we're looking at. And it's always supposed to be led by external it's not always supposed to be led by external stakeholders like DESE. So it shouldn't be us coming in as DESE to look at your program. It should be something you do within your district to help yourself and to help you grow. And that doesn't always happen. So it's an evaluation process. It focuses on the extent that your program is working the way it should. So it's the how about your program, how you're achieving your program's goals. And you should be asking some questions as you go along. Some things that you're looking at are your demographic characteristics of your program participants, the characteristics of your staff, whether they're licensed, how long they've been teaching, what training, what professional development that they've been offered, or any extra endorsements that they may need. The context of your school, has your student population grown? Have they all moved to a different school? Have they been mobile? Those types of things. How your program is organized. Do you have all pull-out programs? Do you have push-in? Do you have a little bit of both? Again, reviewing your LAU plan if you have one. And then information about collaborations. How are your teachers collaborating with classroom teachers? And then other staff, student and family perceptions about your program. And that goes back to your PAC meetings that you have with your parents as well. So those are all things that you take in as part of this process evaluation. And then it's also a summative evaluations, and that's where our test scores and all of that come into play. This summative evaluation focuses on whether it has the affected outcomes and the extent to which the program is achieving those outcomes. So are your students showing growth? Are a certain number of students exiting the program each year? Is movement and growth as you would expect? And is it consistent over time? Those are things we're looking at. So some of the things, the common types of data that you would collect for the summative evaluation, and this comes from the U.S. Department of Education's Toolkit, Chapter 9, and I put the link for you there. But these are the things that we look at based on that. Those scores on state and local assessments, not just the access, but also the access, how the students are doing in the content classes, what their grades look like. Have they been recommended for retention? Are they getting reclassified and exited from the program, either by portfolio or by test scores? Are they graduating at the appropriate time? Are they dropping out? Do you have a high dropout rate among your English learners? Are they also included in gifted and advanced courses? So is that opportunity there for them? Are they getting enrolled in pre-kindergarten, or are those students being put to the side when it comes to preference for pre-kindergarten registration? Are they also being included in magnet and other choice programs? And then do you have an uncommon number of English learners that are enrolled in special education or those types of related services, or special reading or special math? And that kind of, how are they getting in there And is it the appropriate service for them? And then again, have they moved? And what does their attendance look like? Are they involved in sports and clubs and things like that? Are they being suspended at uncommon rates? And last of all, are they included in that college and career readiness planning? And are we helping them further their educational career? So those are all things we look at based on the US EDS toolkit. All right. Why is this important? Because it helps us know if our program is effective. But when we're collecting this information, you need to make sure that it's collected systematically. Because when it comes to sharing this with stakeholders, we want them to know that this information is valid and reliable and that it has been appropriately gathered. We want to be visible in everything that we do so that there's no hidden information from the public. And I shared last time with you, or I've shared in the past, the links that you can go to find all of the demographic and financial information for your district. And if you don't have access to that, let me know and I will share with you how to find that so that you know exactly what the money for your EL program is being spent on. That's important to know.
Tammy,
Yes.
I got a question.
Sure.
A district reached out to me. They were writing their LAO plan and they were getting to the program evaluation piece.
Yes.
And they had seen that list on the toolkit that you just showed us.
Yes.
And they were kind of asking, like, do I need to collect all this information every single year? And I'm not sure if this was right or wrong, but I was kind of like, look, I would look at access data every single year. I would look at mapped data. I might look at, graduation, or there's probably, 3 or 4 of those that I'm going to do every single year. But then you might, and I don't know if there's a rule about this, but you might rotate other things. Like maybe, you're going to look at extracurricular activity involvement on certain years, and then certain years you're going to look at parent engagement programs, or certain years. So I'm wondering, do you have any feel as to, do we need to look at every single data point each year in our program evaluation, or is it okay to sort of make a plan to hit things on different years?
Things like your parent involvement, that's something you should evaluate every year. That's something that we report every year. So when they do the report for their district, that's one of the questions, I think, on your program report, how many PAC meetings you've had that year, so that we document parent involvement. So even if you're not reporting it per se, it should be documented every year so that you if someone came and asked, you could say, yes, we've had parent involvement. It's occurred on this date and this is what we did. So documenting those things and keeping them as part of your data for your program is very wise in case someone comes asking. As far as students involved in clubs and things like that, it's good for, especially at the high school level, for the teacher to remain informed about that. And that helps you know if there's a problem each year. So it may differ from year to year. So it's a good idea to take notice of those things. I don't know if you have to report on it every year, but at least, keep that data going and keep checking on those types of things, finding out if your students are involved. And a lot of schools, that's included on their student system, what programs are involved in. So it could be probably done with a quick check of their data system.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So even if you don't report on it, being aware of it is very important, just so there are no surprises down the road that they're not involved. And for example, we found out that there were students who were getting suspended from school and they didn't know that what they were suspended for was a problem. And so it came as a surprise to them. And then come to find out the school district hadn't translated the student note handbook. And so when it came to disciplining, they were disciplining the student for something they weren't aware of and that they should have known about. So when you're watching like discipline issues and things like that from year to year, it's really important that you're cognizant of what's going on so that you're aware that changes need to be made.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Again, this comes back to why is it important? Because it's a legal requirement for us to evaluate our program. It's part of the Every Student Succeeds Act, and it's also as a result of the Castaneda versus Pickard law case or legal case that sets that precedent for us to do so. It needs to be completed within a continuous improvement cycle. Again, it's up to you what you report on year to year, but even if you don't report on it, you need to be aware of what's going on in the school. And it leads to adjustments in your programming. If all of a sudden, you're not showing gains, it's helpful to have information to say, okay, this is what we did last year, and this is what we did the year before. And why aren't our students showing gains? So it gives you something to go back to and look at to help you figure that out. So what kind of information should be used? This kind of goes back to that last question. It depends. There's no type of information or data that's always important to consider in your program evaluation, but it shouldn't be limited to just what DESE requires on that form. It should be what helps you at your district look at your students and help your students, because their needs may be unique to your district. So it's on an individual school basis. What's the most important thing for you to look at? If your program has been successful year after year, then you may not have to look at the type of program you're working with, but you may find out that your students aren't involved in extracurricular activities. So, like I said, it's different for each district, but being aware of where your students are and what they're doing and what they're involved in will be helpful in determining what needs to be done with your program or looked at. So some common ways of looking at these are whether things are working the way they're supposed to. Looking at the data by school, by program type, by length of time the students are in your program, by talking to students who are formally in the program, or looking at how well they're doing after leaving the program, and then looking at students with limited or interrupted education to see how they're doing. So that may be an area of focus that you may have. So looking at the different groups when evaluating your program is also effective. And sometimes, anytime you do an evaluation, it shouldn't stop with the evaluation, because if you don't address the things and you don't take it further, then your evaluation isn't complete. So you need to act upon them. Just doing the evaluation is just the first prong. So it's what happens after the evaluation that is important. So you need to use the data that you gather. So a lot of times they show an area, your data shows an area of need or growth, but it doesn't always. Sometimes there are no findings. And when there are no findings, that does not mean that that there's nothing that needs improved upon. Sometimes no findings means that you didn't ask the right questions, or that you're not using the best information to answer your questions, or you haven't asked the right people questions. So if everything came out wonderful in your self-evaluation, you need to make sure that you've included parents and students and other staff, and make sure that you've done a thorough job of asking everyone that needs to be involved. And sometimes it is just great and something you celebrate, but other times you want to make sure that you do the best job possible of evaluating where you're at. So what questions should be included? What I have done, let's see. So all of these are things you might talk about. What I've done is I have put together a document for you that talks about all of the areas that you might look at, like staffing and policy and outcomes, changes in your priorities, demographics. That document, oops, is on the next page here. But one thing to consider is if you start to change something, don't expect things to change overnight. There's usually what we call an implementation dip. That's normal and it's anticipated. So the first year that you implement something new, you may not feel successful. But don't stop. Keep trying, and don't just do 1 year and think that's it, it didn't work. And try it out again if you feel that it has some merit. So the next page is the one I'm looking for. So this is a self-assessment. I found something similar and readdressed it to fit Missouri. And let me pull it up here. So it has classifications. So beginning, in transition, and implemented, so that you can do a self-assessment regarding policy, your identification process, the type of program that you're using, student scheduling and placement, your staff, whether you have a coordinator or a leader for your program, your general education expertise, professional learning, professional development, the materials that you use, and the English language proficiency assessment process for your district, your family engagement, your exit information and student monitoring, how you set goals, and integration across your systems such as special ed and gifted and all of that. So this is just a self-assessment that I put together for you. And then on the next chart 2, it talks about what you can do after you filled out the self-assessment. So let me bring this down a minute. So on chart 2 here, so it gives you kind of the seasonal breakdown. At the beginning of the year, if you are in the beginning stages, it tells what you're going to be doing. If you're in transition, these are some things you should be doing. If it's established, again, the things you should be doing. It takes you through summer, fall, winter, and then spring. So it gives you an idea of things that you can do and look at if you're at those stages throughout the year and how you can work on improving. So that's for you there as well. To help plan and implement activities throughout the year to improve your program. And so who should be involved in this evaluation? Again, you need to look to find who would be the best person to fit these categories. Who can coordinate evaluations? Who could be the person who's engaging in class walkthroughs or shadowing of students or throughout the day? Who can facilitate group interviews and discussions? Who can design and administer surveys in your district? Who will be in charge of pulling the quantitative data? And who's going to analyze that? And then who will review the state and district federal policies, your ALLOW plan? And then who's going to be in charge of reporting those findings once they're gathered? So you need to make sure if it's going to be, hopefully it won't rely or all fall on one person. And you could sparse this out to the person most qualified to gather and share that information. It needs to be a team effort to be effective and to get all stakeholders involved. So coordinating the program, it needs, well, certain staff assume that role of coordinator. Who's going to establish that timeline and communicate the process with the stakeholders and identify the components necessary for the program. And then engaging in classroom walkthroughs or shadowing. So in the district that I was in for a while, we were doing classroom shadowing, and that was very helpful for evaluating our program, gave us some insight to what we were doing. And sometimes also just recording your teaching in the classroom, like we did when we were doing our practicum. That's helpful to see what's going on and what changes could be made. So observations should focus on 2 areas: supporting classroom environment for academic discussion and writing, and what the students are saying and doing as they're engaging in learning. So it needs to be someone doing the walkthroughs that has an idea of how we work with English learners or multilingual learners, and should be representative of the grade level and courses and programs that they're familiar with. Okay. And then somebody to facilitate those focus groups. There is a link here that kind of gives you an idea of how to do focus groups or interview protocols from New York that I thought was very good. Focus group questions can be in many different formats and with very varied people like parents or community members or the students themselves. So someone that can do that is very helpful. And then surveys, again, there are some surveys on this New York Education Government website. But designing surveys sometimes that you give to other staff members, for example, can give you some information that you may not have thought of, or things that they feel would be helpful that you hadn't considered. And then both analyzing the quantitative and the qualitative data, again, involving other staff members to help figure out some needs or some different ways of looking at the information, looking at your access data, looking at your MAP or end of course exams, and looking at formative even, what's going on in the classroom if you're doing portfolios, and having a process for evaluating portfolios would be included in this step and this information. And then looking at district, state, and federal policies and making sure that they mesh. The district should review policy each year. Again, I've said this before, your allow plan should be evaluated every year to make sure that it's evaluating what you want it to evaluate. Is the information available to parents? Because that's one thing that is a requirement, that our parents know what your program is, what the outcomes are, how effective it is. That all needs to be shared with parents in a language that they understand. So make sure that you have those interpreters there for those meetings. And that's the reason for at least one of your PAC meetings every year, that you're sharing outcomes and goals of your program. All right. And then reporting findings, not just to parents, but to the community, to the school board, making sure that it's transparent and everyone has information about your program. And that not only gives information about your program successes and needs, but it also helps to inform needs like for staffing. If you gathered all of this data, it helps you when you go to your administrators or your school board to have that to back you up in saying, this is where we are, this is what we have, and another teacher would really help us out. But if you've done all this other work and you've gotten all of the surveys and all of this other information, when you go to report them, that makes it more credible and gives you more to back yourself. All right, so at the district level, we're looking at systems, structures, and resources. The system, what's your plan look like? What's your district action plan? Your connection to other systems, professional development, having that in place. If you're meeting the needs of your EL staff, and then resources, those adjustment of positions, distributing the funding and staff appropriately so that no one's overworked. So what steps is your district doing to provide new and continuous supports for your teachers and the program? That's something you should be looking at. Then at the school level, looking at the data that comes in, because at the school level, that's where that CSIP plan comes into place, and your school gets a certain number of points based on how well your English learners are doing each year. So that's where your school student progress comes into play as far as school improvement plans. So they're part of that evaluation. So that's something you need to look at the school level. And then at the classroom level, looking at getting down to the student themselves and what domains are they showing strengths and weaknesses in? What are their needs? How should we be grouping them? What teachers work best with them? And what needs will they have for next year? And are they ready to exit the program? Evaluating their data as it comes through. And then designing that plan for their services and setting goals for them. If you want information on that, nothing has really changed from last year. You can go back to the 21-22 check-in hub and look at the May links, and it walks you through that whole evaluating your student data and setting goals for the new year. As far as that data, there, as I said, there are no changes for next year. This is our benchmark year. This is our beginning. So from here, we're looking next year for growth and improvement as far as evaluation. No evaluation on this year's by the state. That will come next year. But internally, all of the things that I've mentioned previously should be taking place to see how your program is doing. So this is your year to say, hey, this is year one. We need to look at our data. We need to check that we are on the right path. We have all the information in place, because next year we really want to shine. So this is your year to say, hey, this is where we're starting. This is our year one. When it comes to next year, we want to show improvement and growth and make sure we're on the right path. So that was the reason for this kind of focus for today's meeting, is getting you ready, because this is our first year data and we want to show growth in the coming years. All right. So if you have questions on any of this, you can contact me anytime. But our mail specialists are also available to give you help with that. Their links are there. And that's all I have to offer today. And I'm ready for any questions you may have as we've come to the end of the school year. So I'm going to quit sharing. Well, actually, I'm going to do one more page and ask you to please do that evaluation. The link is in the note taker as well. And if you'll click on the link in the note taker, it would be appreciated. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just have you, if you have any questions for us for the end of this, for the year.